All right, welcome back. This is episode 3 of the Combat Cave podcast, and today we actually have with us our first guest, Jacob Merrill.
How you guys doing?
My brother. He's gonna help us, and I am Taylor Merrill, of course, and this is Patrick Larimer. We're your usual hosts. Jacob's gonna help us just go over the results of last night's fights, and
Because he's awesome.
because he's awesome and he knows what's up. So, and just full disclosure, we are all marginally hungover. We drank far too much last night, but it was fun and no regrets.
Never.
So, man, let's just get right into Dustin and Connor, huh? Dustin kind of shook up the world.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
Very handsome man.
very handsome.
That hair was on point.
I mean, to me, it just, I mean, we did kind of talk about this in the last episode, that the key for Dustin, and I didn't think it would happen this early, but the key for him to win was to take something out of Connor early. And he did that with that takedown and all that clinch work in that first round. I didn't think that it would begin to pay dividends in the second, but I think it was that clinch work and that takedown and kind of exhausting Connor, taking something out of him. Not exhausting him, but wearing on him. But that coupled with those low calf kicks, just he took a lot more out of Connor a lot earlier than I thought was possible. You know?
Indeed. Connor looks rusty. He we kind of saw a different Connor last night. You know, he typically is kind of like this hothead, lots of energy, and he puts on a big show. And man, as much as I love Connor, man, he looked rusty. He didn't check those kicks. I mean, after a couple of clean connections to the calves, man, you immediately saw him putting weight, shifting differently. And then, you know, after those couple of clean hits, you know, he wasn't able to move as much as we are used to seeing him move. His energy seemed low. I feel like he got gassed out pretty quick too, man. But props to Dustin for pulling a W. I feel like he played his game really well. That's what happens when you go a year without fighting, man.
Exactly. It's really, these days, rise of the calf kicks. Look at all the fighters that are just debacling. A lot of their competition with these calf kicks. And also, Connor just did not seem bouncy like he used to be. Using the front kick to the sternum. He wasn't bouncing back and forth, fighting as long as he used to. Wasn't really checking the kicks either. He caught a couple and he checked a few of them, but those first few, he just kicked them so hard. Like those calf kicks getting clutched by the middle of round 2.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something that's always kind of given me pause, is that you hear, and Connor said this before, where he has all of these tools in his arsenal, and no doubt he does, but kind of in this latter half of his career, I mean, he's become so boxing focused that a lot of those tools, you know, as you were saying, the teep to the sternum, that front kick, and these other tools that he uses setups, he doesn't implement those as more, and as a result, he has fewer opportunities to set up the money shot, which is obviously that big left hand. And you know, I mean, he talked about it in the post-fight press conference, where he's like, you know, I have so many more tools, and I kind of wish he implemented more of those earlier on. But you know, credit to Dustin, because a lot of that was him taking away Connor's opportunities to use those tools. You know.
Exactly. Dustin's a beast, guys. Dustin freaking Poirier.
Yeah. As soon as he smelled blood, man, he just started pouring it on him.
We made some money.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. I wonder what that bonus check was like.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, man.
Yeah. What's next for you guys? Want to start with Connor or Dustin?
Let's do Dustin. Let's do the winner. I think if you're Khabib, it's super boring. If I'm just going to be frank, I don't think Khabib watched that fight and saw anything that would get him to think a second fight with Dustin would go any differently. And I think Dana probably thinks that. I think most of the world probably thinks that. So I don't think Khabib is coming back despite what Dana's saying. So what do you do with Dustin? Well, from a business point, if Dana's telling the truth and saying that this fight did really, really, really good numbers, then you run it back. And you can run it back with a good story because now they're both 1-1, right? So, you could have Dustin fight Conor again and put an end to that trilogy. But looking at the rankings, man, I mean, maybe you could have him fight Charles, but it sounds like they're thinking about doing Charles versus Gaethje. It wouldn't make sense to have him fight Tony because Tony's coming off 2 losses. And then everybody else down the line just, isn't interesting enough or, a big enough fight for Dustin to realistically take. Even somebody asked him at the press conference, Chandler got a big win. What do you think about fighting Chandler? And he just completely dismissed it. No interest.
He didn't seem very excited at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, he mentioned in the press conference as well that that he did not have fun leading up to the fight. That he only enjoyed the fight part. So it would also probably happen in the U.S. when he does fight again. That quarantine, he didn't seem happy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So even though we just saw it, the fight that perhaps makes the most sense is to run it back with Conor again. It depends on how willing he would be to fight someone coming off of a loss because this new and improved Justin Gaethje, although he just lost to Khabib, it's obviously very forgivable because everyone loses to Khabib. But you have to think that this new Gaethje may fight Poirier differently if they were to fight again. So you could potentially do that, But not a ton of options, which is odd when you're the winner, but not a ton of options for Dustin if Khabib isn't willing to come back. I would like to see a third Conor fight, kind of put closure to that now that they're tied.
Take my money, Dana.
Right. $75. Uncle Dana.
What do you
So doesn't Conor only fought twice up to now?
Yeah. First time six years ago it was?
Yeah, the first time it was by submission, right?
No, Conor knocked him out the first round.
Okay. And then it was last night's fight.
Yeah.
And I could have swore that it was Dustin that put him into submission one time.
No, that was the first. Oh, there's another thing. That was the first time Conor's ever been finished by strikes. The other 4 losses were all
by submission. Yeah.
It's something to say for Dustin Poirier's strikes. He went a total of about 7-8 rounds with Nate Diaz. Conor's gone. Eddie Alvarez. He made him look like a schoolgirl in the courtyard. Just Dustin Poirier. Oh yeah.
You have to give it to the guy. He granted that Max Holloway, when he went up a weight class and he fought Dustin, even somebody as talented and at striking that Max is, Dustin, all the power. Yeah. At least matching 1 to the 2, maybe 1 to the 3, but still every punch is just devastatingly powerful. I kind of think that Charles is going to go to fight Gaethje, and I think Dustin's going to take one of those winners. And I think that Dustin, if he fights for the belt after Charles and Gaethje, which I think would be a smarter pick to put next, depending, because I think Khabib wants to come back. I think he kind of just said, "Oh, if it's interesting, I'll come back." I think that's just kind of just chewing the fat and talking it up. But I think deep down he wants to come back. He's had time off. He's kind of taking care of things in the family. We saw him with Dana at the thing, pick a fighter or looking for a fighter.
Oh, looking for a fight, yeah.
Looking for a fight, and he looked like he was having a good time. I saw him, smiling, chit chatting. He looked like he was enjoying himself. I can tell that he kind of misses it. So I think he's gonna come back to fight the winner of the Dustin and whoever the champion is.
So you're saying
Charles or Justin Gaethje.
So how you see it playing out is you think Khabib walks away, Gaethje and Oliveira fight for the vacant title, Dustin fights the winner, and then Khabib fights whoever's champ after that all shakes out?
I think so.
That's interesting. I could see that happening. I think that's an interesting thought that, the majority of what's keeping Khabib from fighting is the promise he made to his mom and that he may actually have a desire to fight. I think that's totally plausible, especially because his father wanted to see him go to 30-0. And it's if you just kind of feel for the guy, and we're totally getting off topic, but we'll get right back to what Conor should do after this fight. But if you just think about it from like a human perspective, it's kind of got to be rough if you're Khabib internally, because you kind of have to balance, one, what your mom's current wishes are, and two, what your late father wanted for your career. And your mother doesn't want you to fight without your father in his corner, which is obviously now impossible, but your father wanted you to go 30-0. And so there can be kind of this internal conflict. So even if you're not a Khabib fan, you kind of have to feel for, like, this is kind of a sticky, spot for him internally with those interpersonal relationships. It's kind of a bummer. You got to feel for the guy. So where does Conor go from here? Jake, you want to go first?
Yeah, he's got a couple options. The rematch with Dustin Poirier for their third fight. They could run that back a couple months from now, probably in the U.S. though. It would hopefully happen there. Or Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz is looking for a fight at 155. Well, that's at least what Dana White has said. Yeah. I haven't actually seen any of that come from Nate Diaz's Twitter or anything like that. He could also fight RDA. That was scheduled, if you guys remember, before he fought Nate Diaz the first time. That was supposed to be for the lightweight belt. RDA looked great against Paul Felder, even though Paul Felder was not fight ready, even though he was skinny. That could happen. What else is there other than that? Tony Ferguson, probably not. So he's got a couple options. They're all gonna do well. Pay-per-view buys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he could obviously fight anybody, but I think it's pretty fair to say that Conor, at this point in his career, and how Dana wants to use or to utilize Conor from a business perspective is they only really want to put him in fights that are going to do well. And although fans would love to see matchups like Conor and Tony, or Conor Gaethje, these types of matchups, you have to kind of balance a reasonably competitive fight with business opportunity. And I think at this point now, if you're not going to run this Poirier fight back and bring closure to that trilogy immediately, you kind of have to do the third Nate fight. And personally, I think that's what I would like to see, because kind of what Conor said and what we've been talking about, him being out for a year, that lack of experience. And I like that, there's a fine line. Chael was talking about this on his channel, that there's a fine line between an explanation and an excuse. And Conor talked about the inactivity being the reason why he didn't perform well last night. And that's not an excuse, but it is a very valid explanation. And I think it's one that we can all agree is probably a really good one. And
into the perishable skill.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would like to see, Dustin, on the other hand, is somebody who's, way more active and had way more experience. Conor talked about how he's had double the experience over the past, since they've fought. Dustin's had twice as many fights. So what I would like to see is, instead of throwing Conor, if I was running things, instead of throwing your biggest asset right back into a super tough fight with Poirier, give him some more octagon time with somebody like Nate, who isn't an easy fight. He's probably a lot easier than Poirier. That way you get Conor some more experience. Mm-hmm. Hopefully he gets a win. Yeah, and if he gets a win, he gets his confidence back. And then you bring closure to that trilogy. And then you can run the Dustin fight back again.
Yeah. And these are all awesome fights too. This very it brings a big crowd, lots of money, makes everyone happy. I personally, I don't like seeing like a Connor fight and then a month later another Connor fight and then a month later another Connor fight. I kind of feel like it's beating a dead horse, and that kind of aspect. Oh, it's Connor again. Not that I don't love Connor and his charisma and his showmanship, but just from a business aspect of it, you don't show the same show pony at every single show. But I would love to see a Connor and Nate fight again. There's a lot of bad blood there, I think, and a lot of
We'll get a funny press
heavy words.
conference.
Oh yeah, for sure. Take the monster can away.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely get. Something people talked about with this build-up was that, it didn't bother me personally, but it was notably different. That they were a lot more friendlier, more cordial. There's still a competitive edge there, but definitely friendlier. But you kind of need somebody, a different type of energy to get that old, really aggressive, really grimy Connor, the guy who's really brash and says a lot of dickhead things at the press conferences. And if you wanted to, there's no other guy, maybe Habib, other than Habib, there's no other guy on that roster that could bring that Connor back, that entertaining highlight reel press conference Connor, than Nate. That'd be such a gnarly build-up.
I agree.
Especially because it's, for all the marbles now, they're 1-1.
Oh yeah.
So,
what type of timeline you guys think that could happen? Let's say they do choose Nate to fight Connor next. You guys thinking like 9 weeks from now? 9 weeks from now? 2 months? 3 months? 4 months? 5 months?
I think it would depend on Dana's willingness. And someone asked him this at the press conference, and he gave a non-answer, which is pretty typical of Dana, especially after the fights, which is fine, But he's unsure of whether or not he would have Connor fight at the Apex. And if it wasn't the Apex, there'd be no crowd. And if you're him, even if it's a limited crowd, you kind of want to have Connor fight with the crowd. So they're not even going to go back to Fight Island, I believe, until the summer, June, July. If you could get Connor to fight Nate in June, July at Fight Island, they could do that. How, all of the things in the world that are going on right now, how those things play out, whether or not we get crowds back sooner. But you could definitely have it by the end of the year. But that's the thing, is it's a catch-22, because it's like, and that's kind of what has screwed Connor over this past year, is it's a balance between Connor wants all of this cage time, he wants all of this experience, but you don't want to have your biggest asset fight without a crowd. Mm-hmm. But you're actually hurting your biggest asset because you're not letting him get that experience.
Right.
And so you don't want to have a repeat of that this year. So even if you do have to suck it up and have Connor fight at the Apex with no crowd, you're still going to get a crap ton of money with the pay-per-view. I would like to see him fight as soon as he's ready to fight again. Apex or not.
What is Apex, for those who don't know what that means?
So that's their privately owned facility in Las Vegas, where they shoot the Contender Series, Dana White's Contender Series. So they build their own infrastructure. They have their own, you can call it an arena. There's not crowd seating, but they have a cage, and it's a legit event center. And they obviously they can create their own bubble there, and that's where they run all the fights now on the U.S. or North American side of things, and then they do all the international stuff in Fight Island because they have a similar bubble. So,
the facility over there at Fight Island is, 5-star,
world class
all the way around.
It's beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Man, looking at the hotels, geez.
It's the W, it's called?
Yeah, the W Hotel. Yeah.
Man, that thing looks awesome. I don't think I've only maybe stayed at a hotel like that once, and it was mom and dad.
Yeah.
We went. Where was it that we went to? That's really nice. It's the one in Arizona.
Star Pass.
Yeah, Star Pass.
Yeah, that's a fantastic hotel. So, Chandler Hooker.
Ooh. Chandler looked good, didn't he?
He did look good.
He looked great.
And 0 for 3. My last 3 picks. None of them.
Man, So, yeah, I mean, we both picked Hooker. We both thought that he would get it done. Man, Chandler, he really shined under the bright lights of the UFC debut. It's not like he hasn't had tough fights before. Obviously, he has. I mean, he's got a ton of experience. He's extremely capable. But we all kind of thought that there would be a just a noticeable difference between a Bellator fighter and a top 10 UFC fighter, and oftentimes there is. Oftentimes these guys come over from different organizations, and there is a notable difference. There's a big gap. But Chandler showed that he is not part of that group, and he very much established himself as a legit contender at lightweight.
I think that Hooker, that's a horrible last name. Sorry, dude. Every time they say his name, I'm just like, anyway, Dan Hooker, I feel like he went into that fight a little overconfident and was underestimating Chandler. And I think Chandler capitalized on that because every time there was a really good strike that got landed, it seemed like the Hooker was kind of not prepared for it. It kind of seemed like he wasn't trying as hard as he could, and he waited too long before he got hurt. Because in the knockout punch, he had his hand down, and it was just wide open. And he almost looked at it coming. I feel like he made a lot of mistakes. I feel like that, or in my opinion, I think that Dan Hooker has better form, and he looks a little bit sharper. And Chandler, not to take away from anything, he's an amazing fighter, and he put a top 10 down and knocked him out. He has a lot of potential and a lot of growth, but this fight, you can kind of tell he was nervous. He was rigid at first. It's his first fight in the UFC against the top 10 in his weight class. But man, props for coming out with a win. He wanted it. He did good. I would like to see him hone his skills a little bit more. He seemed a little bit on the wild side. And granted, once you get into a ring, there's only, all the fights that I've been in, which is maybe like 3. And apart from sparring, when you get into that motion, a lot of your thoughts just go out the window. And you're kind of just running on emotion. It's hard to keep composure, but man, he did really good. I was happy to see that Chandler won. I wanted Dan to win, but good job, man. I'd like to see growth. I want to see him, kind of come up. How old is Chandler? How old is he?
34, 33-ish.
Something like that.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Dan Hooker's in his late 20s.
Yeah.
But Dan has quite a few years left. Chandler, man, I didn't know he was that old.
Yeah.
Not that 34 is old, but as a UFC fighter, it kind of is.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a good fight as long as it lasted. Pretty standard Michael Chandler. A lot of pressure. Immediately started getting Hooker to back up, and a great UFC debut. Post-fight speech or post-fight interview. A little Colby Covington-esque, super yelly. I don't know about the Conor call out. I don't even think Conor will respond to that. But I don't really think that fight is super interesting. But
At least not yet.
Yeah, but looking at the rankings, I don't think that it's out of the question that at a bare minimum, Chandler would probably take. It's interesting when somebody coming in from a different organization, instead of working themselves up through the rankings in-house, do you just swap out Chandler versus Hooker? I can't see how Hooker could be still ranked above Chandler after losing to him. So I would. It wouldn't shock me if Chandler ends up somewhere in the top 10. Maybe takes Hooker's spot. Hooker moves down a couple. But as far as what we'd like to see, or where we'd like to see him go after this, what do we think? What's a good fight for Chandler after this?
I'd like to see him fight Ferguson.
Yeah.
That would legitimize his call out to Conor more, especially if it's just right underneath him as far as rankings go. Um, there's a lot of depend, how Conor does, what his next fights are, what is lined up for him in the future. But I think that if he's right below Conor as far as rankings, and he's wins a couple more fights, like he takes out Tony Ferguson, um, maybe even Charles Oliveira. Um, I just don't think Chandler right now has enough experience to go over some of them head honchos up there. I mean, Connor's a legend for a reason. Dustin Poirier is a legend for a reason. Gaethje, same thing. I think Chandler needs a few more wins before Connor's even gonna raise an eyebrow to him, but hey, man, got some guts calling out one of the greatest of all time.
It's a tough spot for Michael Chandler. What's next? A few of the guys are coming off of losses, or Connor's not going to fight him. Dustin Poirier, he didn't seem like he was interested in the post-fight press conference. Charles Oliveira, that could happen if they don't book that with Justin Gaethje. Maybe they do a Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, too, and then Chandler could fight Charles Oliveira. It's kind of just a tough spot, like you said, coming into the division from Bellator instead of working up his way up the rankings. It fits really weird right now, especially with Habib is probably going to vacate the belt. There's no real champion. I don't know.
Right. It's just kind of strange because like our top five or top six in this weight class, like it just kind of depends who they fight, and how and what the outcomes are before I can even feel comfortable of saying who you should fight next. Because Conor probably wants another against Poirier. Khabib wants another one with Conor. I think that's pretty obvious, and so does Conor. I think Conor's always down to fight Nate.
We'll take a break real quick and use the bathroom.
All right.
Break time.
All right, welcome back from that brief intermission. So, just went over where we think Chandler goes from here. Let's get into what we think about for Hooker. Personally, I think that I think he's definitely still top 10 material, so I think he should fight someone in the top 10. Maybe you get a little bit outside of it. I think that the RDA fight is interesting. I think that'd be an interesting matchup. He's already fought, he already beat Paul Felder. Already beat Al. I don't know if you challenge Kevin Lee like that right away after some losses. Beneil Dariush is he?
Yeah, he tore both ACLs his last fight in Brasilia.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And that was wild.
That was the last event before COVID.
Yeah, that was last March.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, those are big injuries to come back from. So, Beneil Dariush has been on a hot streak though. You could have him do, Hooker versus that, but they're pretty far apart in the rankings. I think the RDA fight would be a good one. I don't know. What do you think?
RDA, I like it too. I don't know if Tony Ferguson would take it, unless they want to give Islam Makhachev a really big step up and just see, kind of throw it out there. That's kind of more of a Hail Mary, but I like RDA too.
I think Hooker needs a couple. I mean, every time you come off of a loss, you need a win to kind of get your motivation back and kind of feel better about yourself when you go into a fight. And it's hard to find, let's say we want Dan Hooker to win his next fight, but we also want this fight to be a good fight that was going to give him some better standings. And I'd like to see him fight RDA. Man, it's rough. This weight class is rough.
Yeah, nothing but killers. No easy fights.
No, there isn't any. It's like, who does he fight? Well, you have to take into consideration who's willing to do the fight, and then you have to jump over to the business aspect. What's going to sell? Ah, man.
No.
I mean, just coming from me, I just think he needs a win before he. Hey, the Chandler and Hooker fight would be cool again. Number 2.
I mean, another great fight. I think it'd be an interesting matchup. Both guys coming off of losses, which is typically what you want to do. But I think stylistically would be a fun fight, but also very competitive. Would be Hooker and Tony.
What kind of fighter is Tony?
Just a dog.
Very aggressive.
A lot of volume, a ton of high level striking, gas tank for days, phenomenal jiu-jitsu, unorthodox takedowns, does a lot of Imanari rolls, a lot of outside trips, ankle picks, things like that. And absolutely legendary toughness and durability.
If I'm not mistaken, he has a hell of a chin too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most of these cats do.
For sure.
This is.
No one's really chinny in the top 10.
What do you think about that, Hooker and Tony?
I really like it. I think it makes sense. I think you could have almost made Dan Hooker, Tony Ferguson, and maybe stuck Chandler something else before they booked this fight, which they didn't announce it until 3 weeks ago, maybe.
Which one?
The Chandler Hooker fight.
No, I think it's been.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't see anything about it for a little while.
Yeah.
But I like it a lot. It makes a lot of sense because they're both coming off of losses, and it could headline a fight night or be a co-main on a pay-per-view, whatever they want to do. It'd be a good fight.
Yeah. For sure. Anything else you guys want to go over before we wrap it up?
Timeline for Michael Chandler, and what do you guys think? He could. It's hard to pick where he's gonna go, or do you think he just sits out for maybe 6 months and then it might be a little different?
No, I think if you're Chandler, you want to get right back in there and build off of this momentum of a highlight reel knockout against a tough guy like Hooker. Especially if you're calling out guys like Conor, you're really gunning for the top. You obviously want the Khabib fight, even though whether or not he's going to come back remains to be seen. But you don't want to, especially because he didn't get injured at all in this fight, didn't take any damage, and you want to keep that momentum going. So even if, personally, I think that I wouldn't say wasted, but there were some other names I think he could have dropped in his post-fight interview that'd be more realistic to build up to another fight. You're not going to get the Conor fight. Conor's not going to do that with you. Poirier even said in his post-fight press conference interview he has no interest in that. And then Khabib is likely not coming back as far as we can tell. So the 3 guys that you chose to name drop in your post-fight interview are all highly unlikely. Where what you could have done is you could have built off the momentum and fight guys that are actually active, that are realistic fights. You could have called out Tony. You could have called out Charles. You could have called out Gaethje. So, I don't know, maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity. Or overestimating the likelihood of being able to get those fights in his post-fight call-outs. But, remains to be seen. But no, I think if you're Chandler, you want to do everything you can to get right back in there.
You got to make a name quick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks again for listening, guys. Please like, share, and subscribe. And also like us on Facebook, Combat Cave Podcast, and follow us on Instagram at Combat Cave Podcast. Thanks again. There's no fights this coming weekend, but on February 6th, it's Alistair Overeem and Alexander Volkov. So we'll we'll be covering that one and get into that one as well. But thanks for watching. Have a good one.